My name is Ოლივიե Κουρტό. I'm the French ambassador. I'm very honored to be here tonight with you for this last panel of the Europe Day with my friend Joseph Nandobashvili and my other friend Dato Turashvili. Dear Joseph, you're a seasoned Georgian diplomat, many times ambassador, PhD in political science, specialist of the EU accession process, and above all, a specialist and a connoisseur, if I can say, of its singularities, of the singularities of its political model. Dear Dato, useless to introduce one of the most famous living writers in Georgia, and also one of the very brave heart of Georgia. During your residency in France, you have discovered the life and the achievement of a wonderful and strange Georgian character that I also got to know quite recently. It's about Michel Mouscheli. I'm going to speed up the introduction because we have, I think, 45 minutes, and I want to go straight to the point on a topic that I find really very demanding, very stimulating for all of us here today in the Europe Day. It's about the work of Michel Mouscheli and how much he was a precursor in terms of reflection in the 30s and the immediate post-World War II Europe on what became our political union and the political model it should follow. It's interesting because it shows maybe I would call in its Georgian DNA this very deep European civilizational roots. But not only that, it shows a true political science reflection on what could come after the nation state. That the nation state, and my God, it was very courageous to say that in the 30s and in the 40s, that the nation state was not the end of history, that there may be something beyond it. And it really, I would say, opened the engine of the car, the political engine, and checked the pieces and see how we could organize that. And that's all his reflection on federalism, an extraordinary vision, anticipation, in a period where it was almost impossible for the people. Let's just imagine, after World War II, during the Cold War, during the servitude of a big part of Europe against under the Soviet rule, it was almost impossible to get out from this reality, but he did it as a visionary. So we're here to discuss about him, his work, and maybe try, at least our ambition today should be to walk you through the books of Michel Mouscheli, his thought and his life, to discuss his main ideas, and I hope coax you into reading his theory. What I would finish saying before letting my friends opening the panel that I will moderate, it's challenging not only for the sake of the beauty of his thought, for the sake of history, it's challenging because it talks of nowadays debate. We are in a phase where the nation state is coming back very strongly. Every day we hear about sovereignty, we hear about, but not only here, in our countries also, about independence, and we're in a period of skepticism on federalism, a period of skepticism on giving up part of your sovereignty for a broader identity and a common good. And so all his recipes, if I can say, all his ideas are very precious to feed the necessary reflection today on this important topic. This is important not only for Georgia, but for all Europeans. That's why it's not an antique. It is a contemporary thinker that deserves to be studied and taught. So, to enter into the core of the topic, I would like, first of all, to ask Dato, because why Dato? Because like me, quite recently you discovered Michel Muschelli, and I found that was interesting to take things, first of all, because we're human beings, by the human point of view. And so I would give you the floor first, but feel free to jump in whenever you want, sure, to answer a very simple question. Who is that guy?
First of all, thanks for invitation and this brilliant chance to talk about him. Joseph is here. It was, I think, 5 or 6 months ago. He told me to do it, and of course, I was going to do it in English, but also I'll do it in Georgian, especially for Georgians, because I think that even Georgians, they don't know about him, and he is not enough well known in his own country, in Georgia. That's why I'll do it in Georgian for you, for every citizen of Georgia. And I think that what you mentioned, the book I wrote in France, it was thanks again because of the embassy of France and also the Dumas Center. I spent 3 months in Paris. There is a special residence for writers. And I wrote a book about the links and relations between France and Georgia. And then that time I discovered that maybe Michel Muschelli will be a main character of my future book, because he's really, really very important person, and we don't know about him because everyone in Europe, also in Georgia maybe, they know two very famous names as the fathers of Europe, Jean Monnet and Robert Schumann. Yeah, two French important persons, but maybe in France, in Europe generally, and also in Georgia, they don't know that there was a Georgian lawyer, Georgian scientist, and the brilliant guy, Georgian, with the Georgian nationality, who started talking about EU and generally about the Constitution of Europe before Jean Monnet and Robert Schumann. It really happened before they introduced the idea of European Union. And we don't know about him because the Soviet Union, we spent more than 70 years there, and the Georgia was so-called socialist republic was one of them. There were 15 so-called Soviet socialist republics, and Georgia was one of them. And during these 70 years, his name was forbidden in Georgia. That's why we don't know, and we didn't know anything about him. It was forbidden, and we could not. I have read about him. There was Rusudan Daushvili, maybe you know. Georgians, I think they know, the Georgian author who generally writes about the forbidden and forgotten names, Georgian names. And I have read her article about Michel Muschelli, and suddenly I discovered then it was Gwansa Gugeshashvili, I think. Yeah. So very few. So there is no information about him because he himself was very young when he left Georgia. It happened before the Soviets attacked Georgia. Before the Soviet.
So he was born in Tbilisi.
He was born in Tbilisi in the beginning of 20th century. He was born here, but he was very young. His father was very rich, I think so. Not very rich, but he had enough money to send his son to Germany and to France. Yeah, it was France. Lyon University, I think. Strasbourg. Yeah. No, Strasbourg was the final place where he lived. Before it was Paris University, Lyon, Munich.
But actually, he lived like many Georgians from the First Republic. He escaped from the country in 21 and followed his studies in Germany and mainly France. Yeah. And his obsession in the 30s, when he came as a fully formed intellectual adult, was the federal state, actually. What is a federal state? And I think his PhD was on federal state. If I'm not wrong, I read that he presented his thesis in 31, so 10 years after arriving in Western Europe. And just to give you an idea, the first constitution project in 48, I think. Maybe
right.
Josep,
yeah, it was 48. Yeah, you are right.
Maybe you would complete on his life, and after we discuss the ideas.
Yes, of course.
Right. Dear Ambassador, dear Oliver, thank you very much for the generous introduction of myself and David.
Dato.
Sorry. Well, we are speaking about the Georgian character, Georgian talent forged within the French education and legal system, which, from my point of view, produced a thinker which probably deserves to be among founding fathers of European Union and European integration in general. I have to go to some legal and institutional terms in order to show you and you, the audience, why we value the accomplishments of Michel Bousquet and why he is distinct from other European thinkers of his time. So as ambassadors mentioned, after the end of the World War II, many legal experts and international scholars across Europe engaged in finding a model, a workable solution for post-war Europe. And of course, Mikhail Muskhelishvili was only one of those who worked on those topics. But our study revealed that, for instance, Austrian Hans Kelsen, Italian Altiero Spinelli, Frenchman Alexander Mark, Georges Sellet, etc., they mainly explored and studied particular elements of the European integration, be them a question of sovereignty or primacy of international law over community law over national law, functioning of community institutions, etc., etc. But what Muskeli did in his work of 1948, L'Europe face au fédéralisme, well before the Schuman Declaration was revealed, is that he gave a comprehensive, explicit, and well-organized vision of the European Union which we have today. And why I'm saying that? Because I have in my notes some extracts from his work. And let me read for you a few of them. It's quite difficult. It's challenging to give you a full account what Muskeli achieved as a scholar, as a legal expert. But let me read for you a few of them.
ბოდიში იოსებ თუ შეიძლება ორი სიტყვით თუ უკვე დაინახეთ რომ პიჯაკი მაცვია შემოწოლმა 35 წელია პირველად ვნახა პიჯაკით რომ გავდიოდი სახლიდან და გავიხდი დაცხა და ასე გამოვხატე ჩემი პატივისცემია დღევანდელი დღისადმი და ზურფასი ელჩისადმი და გავიხდი 10 წელად
we accept please go ahead
კი გამომაყოლა გაკვირებული თვალი იმიტომ რომ არასოდეს I'll explain it later
So shall I continue? Please. So, when it comes to institutional setup, Michel Muskeli clearly stated that the future union of Europe should be composed of federal assembly. Federation he uses in the sense of unity, to federate, to unite, not necessarily a classical meaning of the federation as a form. So, Federal Assembly, Council, Union's technical bodies, the predecessors of the Commission, and Union's Court, so EU Court. He described nature of supranational bodies, the current Commission, and says, those who work for the union's administration and execute laws and decisions of the union's authorities will no longer act as national civil servants, but as union civil servants. So the substance of the Commission. Every employee of the European Commission does not represent the country of his or her origin. They work for the common good, which is the European Union. He introduced the basic principle of the European Union, the precedence principle, and says that in the area of jurisdiction, union law takes precedence over national laws. This is very important. He also wrote about competencies attributed to the union's institutions, including exclusive, shared, and special competencies. He says, the union's institutions only have the powers which have been specifically attributed to them by the union's pact, treaties, EU treaties, adopted by union members unanimously. All other powers, therefore, fall within the competence of the member states. This is exactly how the current European Union operates. Consensus principle. He says that in some areas, member states will maintain special competence, including admission of new members to the Union should be implemented by absolute majority of member states. Exactly what is happening with the accepting new members by the Union even today. The Union's court, this was very important for him. He says that power sharing between Union's institutions and member states will provoke conflicts. He knew that. And such conflicts are to be resolved by an independent jurisdiction, Union's court. The court has to be composed of judges from member states, exactly how it is organized. And pay attention that this has been said in 1948. I mean, probably 80 years ago, right? The court will decide on all conflicts between both in relations of member states with each other and in their relations with union institutions. You know how it happens when one of the EU institutions detect a violation of the EU treaties. This institution takes the member state to the court. Union's membership. Buscelli writes, the governments of the Union have to be democratic. Only those European states which practice a democratic system will be admitted to the Union. The Union will demand that all its members admit universal suffrage and secrecy of free elections, freedom of opinion and expression, free exercise of opposition politics, and respect for human rights. 80 years ago.
Yeah, it was very in advance.
Yeah,
Let me remind you that in 1945, before 1945, women couldn't vote in France. So,
which year?
yeah, we were late. We were not among the first. So the guy was really in advance.
So late?
Yeah. Things have to be said, you know. And there is something I found extraordinary, that a guy raised in a dying Tsarist empire, that he ran away after the Soviet invasion, becoming an adult, growing, learning in university at a time of oppression of his home country, he automatically end up with this visionary. I don't want to cut you, but the example you show, you show that globally, he saw 50, 60, 80 years ago what was to be very difficultly built. Absolutely. And still in the making, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a question I'd like to ask you both, and maybe you can come back to answer with your example also. But you said it was not federalism strictly saying, but okay, I saw in preparing the podcast that he had also a lot of things he wrote on federalism, and also a lot of things and influence from French anarchic thought, Proudhon especially. And he had, I think one of his books is called Towards the End of the Nation State, He had this idea somehow that the nation state was something of the past, and that it had done a good job because it had brought democracy. Democracy appeared in the nation state, but somehow it was something that could be overtaken to move to another phase of humanity. All of this sometimes seems very strange today when, you know, in Europe you have various ways to see the future of Europe. You have in our countries in the West, but also here, people who see Europe as a nation state, alliance of nation states in Europe, l'Europe des États-nations, and those who see it as a federation. In the shoes of a candidate country, do you find realistic or something that we should desire, this aspiration to go until the end to an absolutely federalist view of Europe, and what it would implicate for a candidate country like Georgia, which every day reminds of its sovereignty?
So first of all, I would like to explain what really happened with Michel Mousseau. This is my opinion, to my mind. He wrote the first constitution of Europe, and his ideas of federalism in Europe, where did they come from? I think that he was a lawyer, of course, he was a scientist and so on, but he was also a historian, and he knew so well the history of Georgia. And maybe for you and for others, it's not so well known, but in the history of Georgia, you know, this is very long story, very long. We are very old country and nation and so on. But what happened in Georgia in 10th century, he knew perfectly. And really what happened, how did Georgia unite its federal lands and small kingdoms? It's very interesting. He knew it, and he used that brilliant example in writing of Constitution of Europe. I'm absolutely sure that the inspiration was the Georgian example from 10th century. That how did the king Bagrat III, we well known, if you have been to Kutaisi, there is a big cathedral.
Sure.
That has his name, Bagrat. We say even now, we say Bagrat Istazar, so Bagrat's cathedral, no church. And that Bagrat III, the first king of united Georgia, really what could he do and what did he do? He united the different small so-called kingdoms and lands, Georgian lands, into one statement. So really, he knew, and Georgians, we all know that maybe there is more difference between Kakhetian and Mingrelian than Greek or any German. But he knew that everything is possible if the idea of Joseph was talking about is so important and number one. For example, he had written about Bologna process also in 1988 as Schengen space. He explained before it happened, so many years before. I think, I'm absolutely sure that the inspiration was the history of Georgia. How could we invite Georgian lands and small kingdoms, different kingdoms, by the way, in one country, in one state, in one so-called kingdom of Georgia. That's the golden era for us then. What happened after Bagrat III, but it happened, and he knew about it so well. This is my opinion, maybe crazy, but I'm absolutely sure that he knew it. He knew the history of Georgia, and he used as a good example and small model of Europe from the Georgian history to write the European Constitution.
Right. To answer the question which Ambassador asked, even at that time, all European thinkers were aware that classical federal model would not work. Yeah. Europe attempted to establish...
Just for our friends, why do you think it wouldn't work? The cultural differences?
I will explain. Well, first of all, they were right, and I will explain why they were right.
No, because, you know, I'm just... the kids in school, when you talk about Europe, the first thing they ask is it going to be like the United States of America in 20 years?
Exactly. So this is Muschelli knew, and he saw, because Europe attempted to establish political community and it failed in 1952. Exactly. And Muschelli was aware that at that time, and this is relevant even today, no one can squeeze European states in a classical federation with the central government. And therefore, he came up with a concept of non-dogmatic federalism. And he wrote that like a musician composes a piece of music using various notes, a legal expert, international legal expert, should use various techniques of federalism and various elements of federalism to construct workable Europe. And he was right, because what we have it now, it's not a classical federation. It's not going to be, I think, and everyone understands that this traditional sovereignty is not a valid term any longer. Because even at that time, Georges Chelles said, very simple example, if there is an international law adopted by community members, then the sovereignty no longer exists.
Yeah, not complete.
So it's more, to respond directly to your question, it's more, it has a political sense, it's a political trick to refer to sovereignty in its traditional understanding and terms. However, even at that time, people understood that full sacrifice of sovereignty or full retaining and keeping sovereignty was not possible in Europe. In Europe, because through shared sovereignty, through transferring some national competencies to European institutions, this traditional nationalism has been overcome, which was a reason behind all conflicts in Europe throughout years.
If I take your historical example that may have inspired him and probably did at some point, how come a country that finally recovered its independence quite recently, a few decades ago, can do what Josep said, so giving up what's necessary of its sovereignty, not everything, but what's necessary in order for the greater good, if I can say, to make it short. How can we, it is a subtle idea, not easy to propagate massively, you know,
yes.
Especially when you are confronted to I would say an hostile propaganda that would describe EU accession as a loss of identity, of values, of tradition, etc. You know that by heart. What would be the good strategy to pass some of the ideas of Muschelli, who is a Georgian, by the way, and deeply Georgian, today in the public debate?
Thanks for the question. First of all, I forgot to tell you that, by the way, Muschelishvili was from that part of Georgia where was born the idea of United Georgian Kingdom. He was Mushi, means Mushki. This is the very old Georgian tribes from the south of contemporary Georgia. So the idea came from that part of Georgia, and he knew it so well. The problem you mentioned and you want to talk about now, I think comes from the Soviet period. Because officially we are independent country, officially we could restore the independence of our country, but really we have the mentality of the Soviet times, and the Soviet regime works even now and even in Georgia. So it's true. We don't like to talk about it, but I see it, I feel it, and I know it, because of course, in the beginning we could not say, we did not know what would happen. I mean the contemporary Georgia, what happens now in this direction. But of course there was a doubt. We all had doubt that so quickly, immediately after the officially restoration of independence, we would not be independent country or very the modern country as we wish now. And of course, first of all, I mean the society. Because really, for me, the Soviet regime was so cruel that even now I see the result of their propaganda and the regime. Even now I see, even in the case, even in the mentality of new generation. So it's maybe strange, but it's true. The people and the young people, for example, you can find even among youth, the people they were born after the independence, they had the influence from the Soviet regime. It's strange, but it's true. And the people they lived or they were born in Soviet Union, they can understand me. They know what do I mean. So in 2 words, I'll tell in Georgian with your permission. დედაჩემი სწავლობდა ძალიან ახლოს აი აქ აღმაშენებელზე იყო, ეხა გერმანელების საელჩოა და იქ სკოლაში და მომიყვარო მეორე მსოფლიო ომის ერთხელ დერეფანში დავინახე, მასწავლებელი გამოდიოდა ტუალეტიდანო. და წარმოუდგენელი შოკი იყო, იმიტომ რომ შეუძლებელი იყო რომ მასწავლებელი დავდოდა ტუალეტში, ანუ მასწავლებელი იყო რაღაც ისა. ხო და ახლა რომ მოვედი ტუალეტში, შემხვდა ევროკავშირის ელჩი და გამახსენდა რომ ესე იგი როგორ მიუახლოვდით იმას, რა ქვია, ევროპას რა შინაურული დაახლოებელი გახდა და სულხან-საბა საწყალი კიდე ამას კიდე კარო ამას ვერ მოესწრო იმ საშინელი უარის მერე რაც ბოდიში და ლუდოვიკო მაკადრა უცებ როგორ შეიცვალა ესე იგი რამდენი ვერსალში წავიდა ეს საფრანგეთში ამ წიგზე მუშაობისას იმდენი სულ მახსენდებოდა რომ ესე იგი რა არის წუთისოფელი და რა მუხთალია რომ რასაც ჩვენ თხოვდით ახლა პირიქით თხოვენ და უცებ ჩვენ იმის გამო რომ მართლა ასეთი პოსტსაბჭოთა ქვეყანა ვარ ჯერ კიდევ ჩვენ გწვენია ამას ლაპარაკი მაგრამ რა ვქნათ ვართ. No, I think that we need just one generation and everything will be better. I hope so. And I think that what did we lose? Before the Soviets, everywhere in Georgia, so there was a really huge knowledge of politics generally.
When you said we need a generation, it means that it's a lot about school. It's a lot about what is taught in the schools. And I know that in France, in Spain, and in Eastern Europe, new members, a lot was done during years in the school to slowly, I would say, take out the inheritance of those dark years and substitute that by another look on the society, on the showing that through European Union you don't lose your identity, you don't lose your etc. etc. You don't lose your religion, etc.
So I think that this is also the serious problem, and Georgians they can understand me. Every time we have, I think they also pay attention to this funny story that every time we have elections. So the leaders of political parties and Georgian contemporary politicians, they don't talk about the programs and what kind of ideas they do have and so on. And we generally make choices depend to the leaders. Are they handsome or tall or not so tall or I don't know. So everything but no political ideas and programs. Never since the restoration of the independence. It's true also for me. I see it, and I understand that this is a result of the Soviet regime. So we lost the process we had before the Soviets. Everywhere in every Georgian village. So you mentioned the women rights. Maybe you don't know that it happened in 95 in Guria, the small region. You know Guria. Guria in the small region that was full, so many revolutionaries lived in Guria at that time. So educated people. There were so many libraries. Then Russians, understood why in Guria it happened. Because of libraries. In every village we had libraries. They destroyed all libraries there. They understood that libraries are so dangerous. We were so open to the political ideas, programs, and so on. But it does not happen. So I think that that it's the huge influence from the Soviet regime. But without what does freedom really mean? Before the how can we think about the federalism or any ism?
Sure.
In the case we will be more free, more understandable, and more brave to any different ideas and minds and different thinkers. That's the freedom for me. That's the independence for me. That's the modern statement for me. Yeah. I hope we will have it very soon because it's I think it's time for us to be again part of Europe. This is very old house for us. It's
Back home.
back home. Yeah, it really. I don't say that there was only one exception and only Russian Empire did it. There was only Russian Empire between Georgia and Europe, or Europe and Georgia. There were also Ottoman Empire or Persian or other empires. But we always knew that's our very old house. We go back home. So we always knew and we know it. How many people, I was so happy I entered this space, Requiem it was, Expo Georgia. So I saw many people, especially young people, new generation, kids with parents, grandparents, grandmothers. So it means for me that we are on the same road. We go back to Europe because we were born there. Because we are, if Jean Monnet and Robert Schumann are fathers of Europe, Michel Mouchel is grandfather. So we can call him grandfather. It's easy.
Yeah, Josep, about the ideas, coming back to the ideas of the grandfather.
Well, yeah, before I go back to that, what has to be, well, we need to be back, I agree, but in order to be back, I think that we can promote an idea that this is exactly Michel Moucheli model through which Portugal is what it is now, Greece has become what it is now. Other states of Eastern and Southern Europe became reached the level of progress they achieved, and we need to explain that this can be done through accession process, which is quite a tricky procedure from institutional and legal points of view, but we need to explain to all Georgians that this is exactly the way which 70 years ago Michel Moucheli put forward, and we follow Moucheli path, not path of other thinkers of other nations. We can tell that this is exactly what Moucheli wanted us to do. So if you let me finish my list.
Finish your list, please.
Well, this is very important because this is such a precision. This is such a precision with which Moucheli describes elements which are valid up until today. And for instance, European Parliament. About the European Parliament, it says, it calls it legislative assembly, shall be directly elected by people. In the legislative assembly, each state will have a proportional number of representatives in accordance to its population. And this is exactly how the European Parliament is formed. EU citizenship. He says, nationals of member states shall remain subject to the authority of their states. Union citizenship will expand their status. They have new rights to participate in the elections of the assembly, have the right to free movement, what you mentioned, throughout the Union's territory. Free of movement will result in the abolition of all police measures, in particular that of passports and visas. And Union citizens will enjoy freedom of establishment and exercise industrial, commercial, and other businesses. Such a precision I'd never come across with. Union's budget, even he's very, So he very precisely described how the EU budget should have been formed. So Union's budget will be, first of all, voted by the Assembly, by the European Parliament. The budget will be made up of direct contributions, which is the main part, the amount of which will be set by a law. Union's taxes will also contribute to Union's budget. And after the formation of the economic union, customs revenues will also be sourced for filling up the federal budget. So this is amazing precision to look forward. Constitutional autonomy of the Union's member states within the limits of the Union's constitution, which is a constitutional framework is composed of EU treaties, you know. The governments of member states make final and sovereign decisions. Their decisions remain subject to control, but this is a control of legality in relation to Union's treaties. So I can go on and on. The conclusion is that this person is pretty much distinct from other thinkers of Europe, and his distinction is that he was seeing future European Union completely and fully in legal and institutional terms. And on top of that, in his subsequent works, he also explained how he came to this model. And well, it's a big issue. Then he refers to Proudhon, as you mentioned. So all in all, what really attracted our attention is that he offered a complete and well-organized model of the European Union, which is very close to what we have today.
This is what is striking, actually. It is that first, it is holistic. It's not a technical piece, abstract. Second, it is very concrete, as you said. It's something that everybody can understand. It's very concrete. And third, it actually, most of it happened. That takes me to the point where I would love to hear you both, guys. In the works of Muscheli, of what you know of his work, what are the big ideas that are still not implemented by EU? Because I understand that, I mean, EU is a never-ending work itself.
Absolutely.
Its institutions are not finished, if I can say. Many politicians in Western Europe or whatsoever talk about democratic deficit in Europe, how to have the citizen participate more, etc. And I think some of Muscheli's work might be interesting also. So I don't know who want to take the floor on that. Which ideas in what you read of Muscheli should be revisited by European leaders today? I don't know.
Well, yeah, better I take this question. Well, the very right point you made, Ambassador, is that the Union is an ever-changing balance. Now, this is a quite complex and tricky question. How Muscheli saw this balance, and he was very precise that that balance was necessary to have an equilibrium between two opposing notions of supranationalism, which is above nationalism, national interests, and national interests of member states. And he understood that that kind of balance could only be established through a rule of law. And he says that rule of law should guide the ever-changing balance within the European Union. So I think that if current establishments will be more focused on rule of law and be more to submit themselves better to the rule of law. And everyone knows that every action which EU institutions or members take should be in compliance with the EU treaties, EU founding treaties. So I think that if all EU member states better comply to universally agreed treaties which form the constitutional frame of the Union, I think that the efficiency of the Union would dramatically increase.
Okay. That on that topic, if you want, but also to conclude, how could we go further this introduction to Muscheli's works and life? What could we do in order to help diffuse his thoughts and make it accessible to Georgians? I think that many have never heard of him before today.
I think that what more can I see in Georgia? I travel everywhere in Georgia, so I have been to old villages, I think, in Georgia. Maybe there are some exceptions, but I remember the opinions and what do the people think about Europe generally. They don't like, this is also influence from the Soviet times, they don't like when we talk about Europe as something new in their lives. And if you talk about Europe as a very old and very close and very understandable, this is not geography, this is, thinking. So in this case, for them is not so dangerous idea of Europe and EU generally. For example, I'm absolutely sure that Michel Muscheli knew not only the history of nation and country of Georgia, but also the history of Georgian literature. And you mentioned the women's rights, and it's strange, but it's true. We have a novel written in the 5th century by Georgian author Jacob Chutsesi, and in that first book written in Georgian, so we call it, we say this is the first because we could not discover something written before. So in that first Georgian novel, the main character, the woman, starts fighting for her rights. So it's so strange, really, for everyone, but it's true. And in 12th century also, maybe who was and is and will be Rustaveli for us. He is the author of for us main book in the history of not only Georgian literature, of Tiger in the Skin. How do they in French? Vinicis, prangulot versiashi rakuya. So you know that the author talks in that book. This is also a novel, not only the very long poem or collection of poems, but it's a novel. He talks about equality. I forgot the name. I forgot the word. Equality, yeah. He talks in 12th century. You know maybe that in the beginning of 13th century, დიდი მადლობა. ესპანური სიტყვა იმოვდის ესა პირველი და მაგიტო წვალობ ინგლისურ. There was King Tamar. She was a woman, but was a king for us. Beginning of the 13th century, and he made a huge step against the death penalty, and it happened in 13th century. And so many centuries later, it happened in France, 1981. It happened in France. And in Georgia, it happened 7 or 8 centuries before. And she did it. But it's true. And I'm absolutely sure that Michel Muscheli also knew so well the history of Georgian literature and good examples from the literature. Literature is for me best explanation, best chance to know more about the nation and country generally. So In Georgian literature, it was happening so many centuries ago.
Write a novel about the life of Muskheli.
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I think that's
Let's say what he did. I will let you answer, but let's just not to forget what Muskheli did after. I understand that he's been also, he had a wonderful international career. Yeah, I know. In the US, in the Middle East, in Egypt. You know, he was a global guy, not only Euro, Georgian, I mean, US,
That's why he was
Egypt.
global because he was Georgian, by the way. Yeah.
And he was a big fan of hiking, and actually he died in '61 during mountaineering in Aoste, in the Alps, Italian Alps. Anyway.
Yes, well, for me, Michel Muskheli is not exactly a person. For me, it's a symbol, a Georgian talent, well-trained in France, working for Europe. Yeah. So I think that it's a key message to everyone. As I see, apparently, David, Dato, and myself, we work on Muskheli-related topics. He does his part, and I will do my part, legal and institutional aspects of his work. And, well, I can say for our branch that in coming months we will release our findings about the Michel Muskheli legacy. And I have a proposal to Dato that let us do the joint work. Right. You do your part, I will do my part.
Excellent.
And
Ambassador we join together in the French Institute for the presentation.
Anytime, I'm always ready.
Okay, good. We agree on that. Thanks a lot for that. So this is just the beginning.